The frost had crept into Alina's bones long before the sun rose over Millbrook Farm, and she never imagined that the ragged stranger shivering by her gate would one day return in a carriage of gold to change her life forever. If you believe in kindness, in second chances, and in love that proves itself through hardship, hit like, drop a comment below, share this story with someone who needs it, and subscribe to Golden Outlaw Tales for more stories that touch the heart. Elena Marsh was 26 years old when she found the stranger collapsed against her fence post, his clothes torn, his boots worn through at the soles, his face gaunt with hunger. She had every reason to turn him away. Her family had lost everything the winter before, her father to fever, her mother's health failing, and the farm itself teetering on the edge of ruin. She had no coin to spare, no food beyond what fed her mother and her younger brother Tommy. But something in the stranger's eyes, weary yet unbroken, stopped her from walking past him. She brought him inside, wrapped him in the last clean blanket they owned, and fed him a bowl of thin broth that should have been her own dinner. He told her his name was Jonas, and that he was a farmhand looking for work, having lost his position when the estate he served went bankrupt. He asked for nothing but a place to sleep in the barn and the chance to earn his keep. Elena, against her better judgment and the quiet protests of her exhausted mother, agreed. What Elena did not know was that Jonas was not truly penniless. His real name was Alexander Whitmore, heir to one of the wealthiest shipping fortunes in the county. He had grown tired of women who smiled at his carriage before they ever looked at his face, tired of suitors who calculated his worth before they calculated his character. After his own father had been betrayed by a woman who married him for his fortune and abandoned him the moment scandal touched their name, Alexander swore he would never again trust affection born from wealth. So when a business trip brought him near Millbrook, he made a decision that his friends called reckless and his mother called foolish. He would disguise himself, strip away every comfort, and see who might love him with nothing to gain. The weeks that followed tested him in ways he never expected. He rose before dawn to mend fences with hands that blistered and bled, hands that had never known labor. He learned to muck stalls, to chop wood until his shoulders screamed, to work fields under a sun that scorched his soft city skin raw. Elena, far from coddling him, worked twice as hard beside him, waking before he did and sleeping long after he collapsed into the hay. She never complained, not once, though he could see the exhaustion carved into the hollows of her cheeks and the worry that lived permanently behind her eyes. It was not romance that first drew him to her, but wonder. He watched her give the last of the bread to her brother while telling him she wasn't hungry, though he heard her stomach ache with emptiness in the silence of the night. He watched her sit beside her mother's sickbed singing old lullabies in a voice cracked with fatigue, refusing to let her mother see her fear. He watched her mend his torn shirt by candlelight after a full day of backbreaking work, refusing his thanks, saying only that no one deserved to be cold. One evening, as autumn rains turned the fields to mud and the roof of the farmhouse began to leak in 3 places, Alexander, still known to her only as Jonas, asked her why she worked herself to the bone for people who could give her nothing in return, not even him. Elena looked at him as though the question itself was strange, and said that kindness was not a transaction, that she did not help her family or feed a stranger because she expected payment, but because that was simply who she chose to be, even when the world had given her every reason to grow bitter. Her words settled into him like a seed finding soil, and something in his carefully guarded heart began, quietly, to bloom. But testing her heart came with a cost he had not anticipated. As the days passed, he found himself falling for her not despite her hardship, but because of the grace with which she carried it. He watched her comfort a crying Tommy after the boy fell and scraped his knee, watched her forgive a neighbor who had cheated her family in a land dispute months before, watched her still find moments to laugh, thin and rare as they were, moments of light in a life that had given her so much darkness. He began to understand that Elena's goodness was not a performance for anyone watching. It was who she was in the marrow of her bones, whether the world rewarded her for it or not. Yet doubt gnawed at him too. He knew that the moment he revealed his true identity, everything between them would shift. Would she feel betrayed by his deception? Would she wonder if her feelings had been manipulated, if the man she had grown close to even existed at all? He carried this fear through the cold nights, torn between the truth he owed her and the fear of losing the only genuine connection he had ever known. Winter arrived harshly that year, and with it came Elena's greatest trial. Her mother's illness worsened, and the local physician demanded payment they simply did not have. Elena sold her mother's wedding ring, the last item of value in the house, without a moment's hesitation, without complaint, without even mentioning it to Jonas until Tommy let it slip in passing. When Alexander learned what she had sacrificed, something in him broke open completely. He realized he could no longer let her suffer while he hid behind a lie, even one born from good intention. He resolved that he would return, but not as Jonas the farmhand. He needed her to see exactly who he was, and to choose him, or reject him, with full knowledge of the truth. He left in the night, telling only that he had found paying work in the city and would return when he could. Elena did not beg him to stay, though her eyes glistened with an emotion she refused to name even to herself. She told him to go, to build the life he needed, and to remember that he always had a place at her table if the world ever failed him. Her selflessness, even at the moment of losing him, confirmed everything he had come to believe about her heart. Weeks passed. Elena continued her relentless labor, nursing her mother back to fragile health, keeping the farm from collapsing through sheer will alone. She thought of Jonas often, wondering if she would ever see him again, scolding herself for missing a penniless farmhand who owed her nothing and had promised her less. She told herself it was foolish to hope. Then one crisp morning, the sound of carriage wheels crunching over the frozen road pulled her from the barn. She expected a merchant or perhaps a traveler lost on the country roads. Instead, she saw a carriage finer than any that had ever passed through Millbrook, its polished wood gleaming even under the pale winter sun, drawn by horses groomed to perfection. Her heart pounded with confusion as the carriage door opened, and there, dressed in a fine coat that could not disguise the familiar warmth of his eyes, stood Jonas. Except he was not Jonas at all. He told her everything, standing there in the frozen mud of the farmyard, his voice trembling with a vulnerability far greater than any physical labor had ever demanded of him. He told her his real name, his true fortune, and the reason behind his deception. He told her that he had needed to know if a woman could love him for his heart alone, and that in her, he had found not just an answer, but a home. He knelt in the mud of the yard she had worked so hard to keep, the same mud that had once swallowed his borrowed boots, and asked her to marry him, not as Alexander Whitmore the wealthy heir, but as Jonas, the man she had fed, sheltered, and loved when he had nothing to offer but himself. Elena stood frozen, tears finally breaking free after months of holding herself together for everyone else. It was not the carriage or the fortune that moved her, but the truth that the man kneeling before her, poor or wealthy, disguised or revealed, had always been the same person she had come to love, someone who valued kindness over convenience, and truth over comfort. If this story moved you even a little, please take a moment to like this video, leave a comment sharing your thoughts, and share it with someone who still believes in love that asks for nothing in return. Before we close this chapter, I want to ask you something special. Comment the word kindness below if you believe true love sees the heart before it sees the coin. Elena said yes, not to the carriage, not to the fortune, but to the man who had once mended fences beside her with blistered hands and an open heart. Their wedding was modest, held in the very farmyard where he had first knelt, surrounded by neighbors, family, and the quiet dignity of a love that had been tested by hardship and had emerged unshaken. And though Alexander could have given her palaces, Elena asked only that they keep Millbrook Farm as their home, a reminder of where their story truly began, proof that sometimes the richest hearts are found in the poorest circumstances, waiting patiently to be seen.